Before we start, let me just say, if you've ever poured your soul into a job, only to be shown the door by a man who values a quick buck more than a lifetime of loyalty, then this story is for you. I want you to stick around, because the satisfaction at the end is something we've all earned. Let me know what you think as we go, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this one. My name is Sterling. For 22 years, I was the head of procurement for a mid-sized aerospace manufacturing firm called Aerodyne Precision. It's not a glamorous name, and it wasn't a glamorous job, but it was important. We made the components that other bigger companies use to build things that fly. When a part absolutely cannot fail, when it has to withstand thousands of pounds of pressure at 30,000 feet, it has to be perfect. My job was to ensure the pipeline of perfect parts never ever stopped. I wasn't just a manager, I was an architect. I designed the systems, I nurtured the relationships, I built the entire procurement division from a messy filing cabinet and a Rolodex into a streamlined digital just-in-time logistics machine. I was proud of it. For 2 decades, that pride was enough. Then came Nolan. Nolan wasn't a builder. He was a demolitions expert who thought he was a designer. He arrived with a fresh MBA from a school that probably taught him a dozen ways to say synergize, but not one way to read a schematic. He was all charisma, expensive suits, and a blindingly white smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was made vice president of operations, which made him my direct boss. In our first meeting, he leaned back in his chair, a chair I'd seen 3 previous VPs use, and he told me my department was a legacy cost center. He said we needed to aggressively optimize our supply chain verticals. I just nodded. I'd seen his type before. They come in like a storm, rearrange all the furniture, and then call a janitor when they can't figure out why the power's been cut. My job, as I saw it, was to keep the lights on while he played with the switches. The first sign of real trouble was our primary supplier, a company called Axiom Dynamics. Axiom was our rock. I'd spent 15 years building that relationship myself, right from their early days as a hungry startup. I knew their lead engineers, their floor managers, their CEO. We had a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared obsession with quality. But Nolan saw them as just another line item on a spreadsheet. He started pushing for things that made no sense. He demanded we consolidate more and more of our orders with them, even for parts where they weren't the most competitive. His reasoning was to leverage volume for deeper discounts, but the discounts never materialized. In fact, under his new directives, our costs from Axiom started to creep up. I'm meticulous. It's not just a personality trait in my line of work, it's a survival mechanism. Every invoice, every purchase order, every shipping manifest that crossed my desk was scrutinized. It was around a year into Nolan's reign that I started noticing the anomalies. They were small at first, almost trivial. An expedited logistics surcharge on a shipment that wasn't expedited. A material volatility fee that didn't correspond to any actual market volatility. It was an extra 4% here, 6% there, always on the Axiom invoices, and always personally approved by Nolan before they even got to my desk for processing. When I flagged the first one, Nolan called me into his office. He didn't get angry. He got paternal. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Sterling, you're a great details man, but you need to see the bigger picture. This is the cost of a strategic partnership. It's relationship grease." He told me to just process them. Don't worry about it. I did worry about it. That phrase, relationship grease, it stuck in my teeth. Grease is for gears, not for balance sheets. I started keeping a private log on a password-protected drive. Every inflated invoice, every questionable surcharge, I made a copy. I didn't know what I was looking for. Not exactly. I just knew that the architecture of our business, the one I had so carefully built on a foundation of trust, was developing cracks, and Nolan was holding the chisel. The discovery, when it happened, was almost by accident. I was running a deep dive analysis on a Sunday afternoon trying to find a legitimate reason for an 8% price hike on a standard order of titanium fasteners. It was a multi-million-dollar order, so 8% wasn't pocket change. The invoice had a different payment instruction than usual, a small detail easily missed. Instead of the usual electronic transfer to Axiom Dynamics corporate account, this one was directed to a different account number, still under the Axiom vendor ID in our system, but with a note, per NL directive for NGen Strategic Solutions. NL Nolan. My blood went cold. NGen Strategic Solutions. It sounded like one of Nolan's buzzword-laden brain farts. I did a quick search. NGen Strategic Solutions LLC was a registered corporation, an LLC with a single registered agent. I paid the $20 fee to the state registry to see the documents. The address was a UPS store mailbox in a town 100 miles away. The registered agent? A man who shared a last name and a previous home address with Nolan's wife, his brother-in-law. It was a shell corporation. My boss was using his authority to approve inflated invoices from our biggest supplier, and a percentage of that overpayment was being kicked back to his own ghost company. He wasn't just greasing a relationship. He was robbing us blind, using Axiom as the middleman. I sat there, in my quiet home office, the hum of my computer the only sound. I felt a profound sense of weariness. This was the big, ugly secret. This was the rot at the core of Nolan's strategic vision. And now I knew. The question was, what was I supposed to do with this knowledge? For weeks I did nothing. I was paralyzed. I was a company man. My first instinct was to protect the company, but the cancer was coming from inside the executive suite. Going to the board seemed like a gamble. Nolan was a master of corporate politics. He was well liked by the CEO. They played golf together. If I made a move and failed, I wasn't just out of a job, I was a pariah. Competence isn't cheap until you lose it. And I knew that if Nolan caught even a whiff of what I'd found, he'd make sure I was not only fired but discredited so thoroughly that I'd never work in the industry again. So I kept my head down. I kept documenting. I copied every fake invoice, every email from Nolan authorizing the payments, every scrap of my investigation. I put it all on an encrypted thumb drive that I kept in a fireproof safe in my basement. It felt like holding a live grenade. The pin was pulled, and my thumb was the only thing holding the lever down. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, for an opportunity to present the evidence without getting blown up in the process. I waited too long. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was from HR, a clipped, impersonal voice asking if I had a moment to meet with her and Nolan. I knew immediately. You don't get a summons like that for a pat on the back. I walked into the conference room, and the air was thick with a false sincerity. Nolan was there, looking grave. The HR manager, a woman I barely knew named Brenda, couldn't meet my eyes. Nolan started. Sterling, this is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. He spoke about the changing market, about the need to be more agile, to realign our talent portfolio. He never once used the words fired or laid off. He said my role was being made redundant. Redundant. 22 years of my life, my expertise, the entire system I had built and maintained was being called redundant. He was eliminating my position, and in the same breath he mentioned they were creating a new, more senior role, a director of supply chain logistics, and that they'd already filled it. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. I saw the flicker of unease in his eyes. He expected me to argue, to plead, to get angry. My silence was a wrench in his carefully rehearsed script. He pushed a folder across the table. It was my severance agreement, a paltry sum, contingent on me signing a non-disclosure and a non-compete agreement so restrictive I wouldn't be able to manage a lemonade stand in the same state. Brenda from HR finally spoke up, her voice a monotone drone. You'll be paid for the next 2 weeks. We'll need your badge and your laptop. Someone will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. I stood up, picked up the folder, and said the only 2 words that came to mind. I understand. I turned and walked out, leaving Nolan sitting there with his meaningless speech hanging in the air. The grenade in my pocket suddenly felt a lot heavier. He thought he'd disarmed me. He had no idea he'd just armed me to the teeth. He had taken my job, my career. He had arranged to have me erased from the company I had helped build. But he'd made one catastrophic mistake. He'd forgotten that I was the architect, and an architect always knows where the load-bearing walls are. He was about to find out what happens when you try to knock one down. The walk back to my desk was the longest in my life. Every head in the open-plan office turned to watch me, this ghost on his final procession. A security guard, a kid named Marcus, who I'd always shared a morning pleasantry with, was already standing by my cubicle. He had the decency to look apologetic. He just nodded toward a cardboard box on my chair. "I'm sorry, Sterling," he mumbled. I just nodded back. It wasn't his fault. I packed 22 years into that small box. A framed photo of my wife and daughter. A coffee mug my daughter had painted for me in the 3rd grade. The logo on it faded from 1,000 dishwasher cycles. A handful of technical manuals I'd written myself. My well-worn mouse pad. As I unplugged my personal keyboard, the one with the satisfying mechanical click that I preferred to the company-issued mush, a younger colleague, Dave, came over. I'd mentored Dave for the last 5 years. He was sharp, loyal, and one of the few people who truly understood the intricacies of the systems I'd built. His face was pale. "Sterling, what's going on?" he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "My role has been made redundant, Dave," I said, the corporate jargon tasting like ash in my mouth. "Redundant? You are this department. Nothing works without you." "The new management has a different perspective," I said, keeping my voice even. I looked him in the eye. "Keep your head down. Do good work. And always, always keep your own backups." I gave him a slight meaningful nod. He caught it. He knew I meant more than just work files. I sealed the box and stood up. Marcus, the security guard, walked me to the elevator, then to the main entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and the cold afternoon air hit me. Just like that. No warning, nothing. 22 years, erased in a 10-minute meeting. As the doors slid shut behind me, I saw Nolan watching from a second-floor window, a faint, triumphant smirk on his face. He thought he had won. He thought it was over. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the traffic or the route I took. My mind was a maelstrom of shock and a cold, slow-burning rage. I'd given my entire professional life to that company. I'd worked late nights, weekends. I'd missed school plays and anniversaries to solve a supply chain crisis on the other side of the world. I'd done it not just for the paycheck, but out of a deep-seated belief in doing a job right. I was a craftsman, and I had just been thrown in the scrap heap by a con artist in a $1,000 suit. When I got home, the house was empty. My wife was at work, my daughter at college. The silence was deafening. I dropped the box on the floor of my home office and sank into my chair. I didn't turn on the light. I just sat there in the gloom, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me, a physical thing that made it hard to breathe. This was my low point, the moment of private breakdown. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, internal collapse. I felt hollowed out, discarded. I looked around at my workshop, at the vintage radios I restored as a hobby. Intricate machines of tubes and wires, each one a puzzle of logic and function. Once they were the pinnacle of technology. Now they were just relics. And for the first time in my life, I felt like one of them. My mind started to drift back, replaying the last few years in excruciating detail. It was a highlight reel of professional slights. I remembered the time a critical shipment of turbine blades was held up in customs due to a paperwork error made by a junior staffer Nolan had hired over my objections. I was the one who got on a plane, flew to the port, and spent 72 hours without sleep, personally walking the corrected paperwork through 3 different government agencies to get the shipment released, saving a multi-million-dollar production line from shutting down. When I got back, exhausted but triumphant, Nolan presented the solution in an executive meeting as a successful management intervention he had orchestrated. He never mentioned my name. I let it slide. It was for the good of the company. That's what I told myself. That's the lie a loyal man tells himself to keep going. Then there was the software migration. Nolan, in his infinite wisdom, had been sold a bill of goods by a flashy consulting firm, promising a new, all-in-one, synergistic enterprise platform. It was expensive, buggy, and completely unsuited for the specific needs of our high-precision manufacturing process. I had warned him. I presented a detailed 30-page report outlining the potential points of failure, the risks to our quality control, and the massive retraining costs. He'd patted me on the head, metaphorically speaking, and told me I was resistant to change. He called me old school. 6 months after the disastrous rollout, when the new system was crashing daily and corrupting order data, I was the one who spent my nights and weekends building a series of custom patches and workarounds, essentially building a bridge between their new garbage software and my old reliable databases, just to keep the parts flowing. I saved his skin. My reward was a brief email that said, "Good work getting the system stabilized." Not a thank you. Not an acknowledgement that I had been right all along, just a pat on the head for cleaning up his mess. My loyalty had been a currency that Nolan had spent lavishly without ever thinking to replenish it. And now my account was empty. I had tolerated his arrogance, his incompetence, his endless stream of buzzwords, all because I believed in the company, in the work we did. I believed my competence was its own shield. But I was wrong. Competence doesn't protect you from a man who sees it as a threat. In fact, it makes you a target. He couldn't control me because I knew more than he did. He couldn't bamboozle me with his jargon because I dealt in the hard reality of logistics and engineering. So he did the only thing a man like him could do. He removed me. And the kickback scheme with Axiom, it all clicked into place. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control. By forcing all our business through a single compromised channel, he made himself the gatekeeper. He didn't need my expertise if he was the only one who could open the gate. Sitting there in the dark, the humiliation began to curdle into something else, something harder, colder. It was resolve. The fog of shock and grief started to clear, and in its place was a sharp, crystal clarity. I had been a fool. My loyalty hadn't been to Aerodyne Precision, the company I loved. It had been to a name, a logo. The company I loved had been dying a slow death ever since Nolan arrived. My true loyalty, I realized, was to the work itself, to the principle of integrity, to the idea that things should be built correctly, honestly, and without a parasitic leech sucking the lifeblood out of the process. My phone buzzed on the desk, a text message. It was from Dave. It read, "It's a madhouse. They can't find the Q4 validation certificates from Axiom, the ones you always kept in the secure digital vault. Nolan is asking for your login credentials. He's telling everyone you failed to transition your duties properly. He's trying to blame you already." That was it. That was the catalyst, the final push I needed. He wasn't just firing me, he was trying to salt the earth behind me, to pin his future failures on my ghost. The image of Nolan, panicked and incompetent, scrambling to find something that he had no idea how to access, lit a fire in my gut. He thought I was redundant. He was about to learn the true meaning of the word. I stood up and switched on the light. I walked over to the fireproof safe in the corner of my basement workshop. I spun the dial, the clicks precise and familiar. Inside, next to some old family documents, was the encrypted thumb drive. I picked it up. It felt different now. It wasn't a grenade anymore. It was a key to a door Nolan didn't even know existed. He had betrayed me. He had betrayed the company. But his most critical mistake was betraying his partners in crime at Axiom Dynamics. He assumed their greed made them as stupid as he was. He assumed that a company built on a reputation for precision engineering would be happy to risk it all for a few extra percentage points. He thought my silence was weakness. He thought my loyalty was foolish. He was about to find out that a quiet man who has been pushed too far is the most dangerous man of all. My resolve was no longer quiet resignation. It was cold, hard, and strategic. I wasn't going to get mad. I was going to get biblical. I was going to pull down the temple, and I was going to make sure Nolan was the only one left inside when the pillars fell. The plan wasn't born of a sudden flash of vengeful inspiration. It was assembled piece by piece over the last year, a quiet act of professional self-preservation that was about to become a weapon. The moment I confirmed the existence of NGen Strategic Solutions, I knew I couldn't just walk into the CEO's office. Our CEO, a man named Arthur Vance, was a good man at heart, but terminally non-confrontational. He liked Nolan. Nolan was his golf buddy, his star hire. Vance would see my evidence as a problem, not a solution. He would have convened a committee, hired an outside law firm to conduct a 6-month investigation, and by the end of it, Nolan would have spun a narrative so convincing that I would be painted as a disgruntled, paranoid employee making wild accusations. The company would protect itself, and Nolan was, in their eyes, a bigger part of the company than I was. No, going to my own board was a fool's errand. It was like reporting a leak to the man holding the bucket. My foresight was in understanding the nature of the crime. Nolan's fraud wasn't just against Aerodyne, it was a partnership. He couldn't have done it without someone on the inside at Axiom Dynamics. Someone in their finance or sales department had to be generating those bogus invoices and routing the kickback payments. Nolan, in his arrogance, saw this as a strength, a secret alliance. I saw it as his greatest vulnerability, because while Nolan might have one person in his pocket at Axiom, the rest of the company, their board, their shareholders, were all being defrauded too. Their name was on those falsified documents. Their reputation was on the line. That's where the true leverage was. I didn't need to disrupt our supply chain. I didn't need to sabotage anything. I just needed to inform the right people at Axiom what was being done in their name. Their reaction wouldn't just be to stop the scheme, it would be to cauterize the wound. They would have to act swiftly and decisively to protect themselves from legal and financial ruin. They would cut Nolan off at the knees, not out of any sense of justice for me, but out of pure, unadulterated corporate self-interest. And that is a motive you can always count on. The first step was gathering the evidence in a way that couldn't be traced back to me while I was still an employee. This is where Dave became my unwitting, and later witting, ally. I couldn't just start downloading years of financial records without setting off every digital alarm in the IT department, so I used the guise of mentorship. I'd call Dave over to my desk. Dave, I'd say, I'm working on a long-term cost projection model. Could you do me a favor and pull all purchase orders from Axiom for fiscal year 2021 that contain the phrase logistics surcharge? I need to see the historical baseline. He was eager to learn, to prove himself. He'd run the query, export the data to a spreadsheet, and send it to me. Here you go, Sterling. Anything else? A week later, it would be a different request. Dave, can you pull the payment routing data for all Q3 invoices over $50,000? I'm checking for system inconsistencies. Each request was plausible on its own, a small self-contained task. But piece by piece, he was handing me the bricks I needed to build my case, and he had no idea. The final crucial piece of evidence was linking Nolan directly to the Shell Corporation in a way that was undeniable. The state registration with his brother-in-law's name was good, but it was circumstantial. I needed something more direct. I found it in the digital breadcrumbs Nolan had carelessly left behind. He was arrogant, but he was also lazy. He'd used his corporate email to correspond with the bank that held the account for NGen Strategic Solutions. I couldn't access his inbox directly, but I could access the server's outgoing mail logs. It was a high-level administrative function I still had, a legacy of my role in setting up the system decades ago, an oversight on their part. Under the pretense of diagnosing a mail server delay, I spent a weekend combing through metadata. I wasn't reading the content of the emails, just the logs, sender, recipient, timestamp, subject line. It was tedious, like looking for a single needle in a continent-sized haystack. And then I found it, a series of emails from Nolan.L@aerodyne.com to an account at a small regional bank. The subject lines were damningly generic. Q2 update, transfer query, updated documents. but the recipient's domain was the same bank that appeared on the NGen wire transfer instructions. I took screenshots of the logs, timestamps and all. It wasn't the content of the letter, but it was the postmarked envelope. It put Nolan's hand directly on the weapon. With my evidence assembled, the inflated invoices, the payment routing data, the Shell Corporation registration, and the email logs, I began to build the package. It had to be perfect, anonymous, but undeniably credible. I created a sterile text document, a cover letter with no personal pronouns, just facts. It read to the Chief Financial Officer of Axiom Dynamics, "You are being used as a conduit for a significant fraud scheme by a senior executive at your client, Aerodyne Precision." The attached documents provide evidence of a kickback arrangement involving inflated invoices and a Shell Corporation, NGen Strategic Solutions, controlled by Aerodyne's VP of Operations, Nolan. It went on to detail the scheme in cold, precise language, pointing to specific invoice numbers, dates, and amounts. It explained how the Shell Corporation was linked back to Nolan. It was a prosecutor's opening statement. I copied everything onto a brand new, high-end encrypted USB drive. I also printed hard copies of the most damning documents, the invoice with the NGen payment info, the LLC registration, and the email logs. Physical evidence feels different. It feels more real. You can't just delete it. Now who to send it to? The CFO of Axiom was a woman named Eleanor Albright. I didn't know her personally, but I knew her reputation. She was a legend in the industry, a finance hawk, known for her ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for anything that could harm shareholder value. She was the perfect audience. She wouldn't be swayed by sentiment or old relationships. She would see the numbers, understand the legal exposure, and act like a surgeon, removing a tumor. The problem was getting it to her directly, without it being intercepted by a secretary or a junior executive who might be the very person in Nolan's pocket. This required a bit of social engineering. I had over the years developed a good professional relationship with a mid-level accountant at Axiom, a guy named Robert. We'd worked together to resolve a complex billing issue a few years back, and we'd stayed in touch, exchanging the occasional professional courtesy. I knew from his public LinkedIn profile that he was ambitious and had a deep respect for Ms. Albright. The day I was fired, after the initial shock wore off, my plan crystallized. I knew I had to act before Nolan could fully entrench his narrative that I was a disgruntled employee. I went to a public library, several towns over, used a computer there to draft a short anonymous email to Robert from a freshly created Proton Mail account. The email was simple. It said, "Robert, I am a third-party auditor who has uncovered a matter of extreme financial and legal urgency that directly involves Miss Albright. I cannot use official channels. I need to get a package into her hands, and hers alone. If you can ensure this happens, you will be doing your company a service of immeasurable value. Please respond with a secure drop-off location if you are willing to help." It was a gamble. He could have ignored it, or worse, reported it, but I was betting on his ambition and his loyalty to his boss. It took 3 hours, 3 of the longest hours of my life, sitting in that sterile library, but then a reply came. It was a single line: "Leave the package with the concierge at the downtown Grand Hyatt, addressed to me. Mark it personal and confidential, Albright Project Materials. I will retrieve it myself." He was in. My final act as a free man, before the non-compete and non-disclosure clauses of my severance officially kicked in, was to drive to that hotel. I placed the padded envelope containing the USB drive and the printed documents into the hands of the concierge. It felt like dropping a match into a tanker full of gasoline. I had no idea how fast it would ignite, or how big the explosion would be. I just knew that I had aimed it straight at the heart of Nolan's empire. I walked away without looking back. My part in it was done. Now, I just had to wait for the shockwave. The first 2 days after being fired were surreal. I woke up at my usual 6 a.m., the muscle memory of 2 decades of routine still intact. But there was nowhere to go. No emails to check, no fires to put out. I spent the time cleaning my workshop, methodically organizing tools, sorting resistors and capacitors into their tiny drawers. It was a way to impose order on a small corner of my world when the rest of it had been thrown into chaos. I resisted the urge to call Dave, to ask for news. I had to remain a ghost. My severance package, while insulting, was still money I needed, and I hadn't signed the agreement yet. I was in a strange limbo. The silence broke on Thursday afternoon. My phone rang. It was an unknown number with a local area code. I hesitated, then answered. "Sterling." The voice was strained, panicked. It was Nolan. "Hello, Nolan," I said, my voice as calm and flat as a winter lake. "What did you do?" he hissed. There was no preamble, no false pleasantries, just raw, naked fear. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Nolan. I'm busy sorting through my options." "Don't play dumb with me, Sterling." Axiom. They've cut us off, halted every shipment, effective immediately. They're not taking my calls. They're not taking anyone's calls. They sent a one-line email citing a comprehensive internal partner review. "This has your fingerprints all over it. It's retaliation, isn't it? You sabotaged the account on your way out." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, savoring his panic. It was even sweeter than I had imagined. He was drowning, and he was looking for someone to pull him under with him. "Nolan," I said, my tone deliberately reasonable. "I was escorted from the building on Tuesday. I haven't had access to any company systems since then. How could I possibly have sabotaged a relationship that you, as you've so often reminded me, personally manage? It sounds like you have a problem." "This isn't a problem, it's a catastrophe," he shrieked. "The main assembly line will be down to half capacity by Monday if we don't get those parts. Half. Do you know what that will do to our quarterly numbers?" "I'm sure it will be a challenge," I said, the understatement a small, sharp pleasure. "But you're the expert in aggressive optimization. I'm sure you'll figure something out." He sputtered, a string of curses and threats. He was going to sue me. He was going to ruin me. I was going to be blacklisted. I just listened. He was a cornered animal, biting at shadows. When he finally ran out of breath, I said, "Nolan, I have nothing more to say. I'm sure your lawyers would advise you not to contact me again. Goodbye." And I hung up. I stood there for a moment, my heart hammering in my chest. It was working. The first move on the board had been a quiet one, but it had effectively been a checkmate. He just didn't know it yet. A few minutes later, my personal phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "You are not going to believe this. Axiom just froze our account. Total lockdown. Nolan is a screaming maniac, running from office to office. He's trying to blame you, but nobody's buying it. Legal is already involved. They've sealed his office. This is insane." Sealed his office. The gears were turning faster than I had anticipated. Axiom wasn't just investigating. They were treating Aerodyne like a crime scene. Ms. Albright was not a woman who wasted time. The beauty of my plan was its deniability. I hadn't hacked anything. I hadn't stolen anything. I had simply passed along information. I was an anonymous source, a whistleblower. Nolan could scream my name from the rooftops, but he had no proof. Any investigation he launched into me would only draw more attention to his own activities. He was trapped in a feedback loop of his own creation. The public reveal came the next morning. I was drinking my coffee, scrolling through an industry news aggregator, when I saw the headline, "Axiom Dynamics suspends major contract with Aerodyne Precision, launches internal fraud investigation." It was a short article, sparse on details, but the impact was seismic. It mentioned a potential third-party supplier fraud and stated that Axiom was cooperating fully with authorities. Axiom's stock had taken a small hit, but Aerodyne's, which was also publicly traded, was in freefall. It was down 15% in pre-market trading. They didn't name Nolan. They didn't have to. The article was a public execution. It painted Aerodyne as either corrupt or incompetent, and it positioned Axiom as the responsible party taking swift action. Ms. Albright had played it perfectly. She had simultaneously insulated her company from the fallout and torched Nolan's reputation in a single, devastatingly professional move. I spent the rest of the day fielding calls. The first was from a headhunter I hadn't spoken to in years. Sterling, I saw the news about Aerodyne, a real mess over there. Listen, are you on the market? I've got a senior director role at a competitor that would be a perfect fit. The second was from the CEO of a smaller firm I'd always respected. Sterling, saw you were made redundant. Their loss is a huge opportunity for someone else. When can we have lunch? The blood was in the water, and the sharks were circling. My reputation, the one Nolan had tried to destroy, was suddenly my most valuable asset. People in our industry knew who built things and who broke them. They knew my work. The narrative was no longer about a disgruntled employee. It was about the rats deserting a sinking ship, and everyone wanted to talk to the man who knew where the lifeboats were. The silent takeover was complete. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a single threat. I had simply held up a mirror, and the reflection had shattered the entire boardroom. Nolan thought he had cut me off, but all he'd done was cut the last thread holding the guillotine in place, and now it had fallen. The exodus started on Monday. It was even faster and more brutal than I could have hoped. Dave was the first to call. He didn't even say hello. He just said, "I quit." I walked into what's left of the HR department half an hour ago and gave my 2 weeks. So did Sarah from lead engineering and 2 of the best guys from the logistics floor. We're not staying. We're not going to be the cleanup crew for Nolan's mess. Dave, you don't have to do that for me, I said, genuinely taken aback. This isn't for you, Sterling. It's for me, he replied, his voice firm. Do you know what the new director of supply chain logistics asked me this morning? He asked me how to generate a simple PO. He's Nolan's nephew, fresh out of college. He has no idea what he's doing. The whole place is a ghost ship, and the captain is a screaming lunatic locked in an office with lawyers. There's nothing left to be loyal to. Competence isn't cheap, and they've just proven they can't afford it anymore. His words were a vindication. It wasn't just about my personal revenge. It was a systemic failure. When you remove the bedrock of competence from an organization, the talented people, the ones who care about doing good work, are the first to leave. They can't function in chaos. They won't tolerate being led by fools. The talent exodus wasn't something I had to engineer. It was a natural consequence of Nolan's arrogance. He had hollowed out the company's core, and now the shell was crumbling. Later that afternoon, the desperate counter-manipulation came. It was another call from Nolan. His tone was completely different. The rage was gone, replaced by a wheedling, pleading desperation that was almost more pathetic. Sterling, thank God you answered," he began, his voice slick with false camaraderie. "Listen, we've had a major misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication. The board has been asking questions, and I've been doing some digging. I think some people at Axiom may have been taking advantage of our partnership." I almost laughed. He was trying to recruit me as an ally, to help him spin a new narrative where he was the victim. "Is that so?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes, and I need you, Sterling. I was wrong. I was a fool to let you go. The board, they listen to you. They respect you. I've spoken to Vance, and we're prepared to make you a significant offer. We'll scrap the redundancy. We'll give you the new director title, the one we just filled. We'll give it to you along with a 20% raise and a guaranteed 3-year contract. Just tell them this is a misunderstanding with Axiom. Tell them you can fix it. You built that relationship. You can get them back on the phone." It was the ultimate insult. He was offering me the very promotion he had created to replace me, a position he had given to his own family. He was offering me a bribe, wrapped in a job offer, to help him cover up his crimes. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about money or a title. He had no concept of professional pride or integrity. "Let me see if I understand, Nolan," I said, letting the silence stretch for a beat. "You fired me, tried to ruin my reputation, and installed your unqualified nephew in my place. And now that your kickback scheme has blown up in your face and your primary supplier has cut you off, you want me to come back and lie for you so you can save your own skin." He was silent. For the first time, I think he understood the depth of his miscalculation. "The answer is no, Nolan," I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, final tone. "I'm not interested in your offer. I'm not interested in your company. And I'm not interested in helping you out of the hole you dug for yourself. You made your bed. Now you can lie in it." I hung up the phone. The power shift was absolute. I wasn't the discarded employee anymore. I was the man who held all the cards, and I had just refused to play. The silence from my end was more powerful than any threat or negotiation could ever be. He was alone with the consequences of his actions, and the consequences, I knew, were just getting started. The final confrontation wasn't a shouting match in a glass-walled office. It was a quiet phone call a week later from a man I hadn't spoken to in years, Arthur Vance, the CEO of Aerodyne Precision. His voice was tired, heavy with the weight of the disaster. "Sterling," he began. "There's no need for that, Arthur," I said calmly. "Yes, there is," he insisted. "We've been conducting an internal audit, side by side with the forensic accountants from Axiom. It's worse than we could have imagined. Nolan betrayed us all, and he betrayed you most of all. We let him push you out, and I will regret that for the rest of my career. You were the only one who seemed to have any integrity left in that division." He paused, and I could hear him take a deep breath. "The board has asked me to reach out. We know Nolan has been making desperate overtures to you. We'd like to make you a real one. We've terminated him, of course, for cause. The authorities are involved now. We want to clean house, and we need you to help us do it. We will give you anything you want. Your old job, a new title, a seat on the executive committee, just name it." It was the moment of complete vindication. The offer was genuine, born of desperation and a newfound respect. But the world had changed. I had changed. The thought of going back to that place, even with Nolan gone, felt like stepping back into a cage, no matter how gilded. "Arthur," I said, and my voice was firm but not unkind, "I appreciate the offer more than you know, but my time at Aerodyne is over. I've already signed the non-disclosure agreement from my severance package, so I'm afraid I can't discuss any past business. I wish you and the company all the best in navigating this difficult time." I had used their own legal weapon against them. By acknowledging the NDA, I was signaling that I would not be their star witness or their savior. I was a private citizen now. The mess was theirs to own. There was a long, defeated sigh on the other end of the line. "I understand, Sterling. I can't say I blame you. Good luck to you." He hung up. The news of Nolan's ultimate fate came a few days later, not from a phone call, but from a press release forwarded to me by Dave. It was from Axiom Dynamics. Axiom Dynamics is pleased to announce it is fully cooperating with federal authorities in their investigation into fraudulent activities conducted by a former executive at Aerodyne Precision. Axiom has provided all necessary documentation to the U.S. Attorney's Office. It went on to announce that they had terminated their own vice president of sales, the man who was clearly Nolan's inside partner. The system had not only corrected itself, it was now actively prosecuting the disease. Nolan wasn't just fired, he was facing prison time. His illegal income was gone, his reputation was incinerated, and his career was a smoking crater. My new reality began to take shape not in a blaze of glory, but in a series of quiet, professional conversations. The most surprising one was with Eleanor Albright, the CFO of Axiom. She called me herself. "Mr. Sterling," her voice was crisp and direct, with no room for ambiguity. "My name is Eleanor Albright. I believe you and I have a mutual interest in professional integrity. My company has a significant problem. We have a multi-million-dollar contract with a key customer that is currently in ruins, and we have a serious breach of trust to repair. We've cleaned our house. Aerodyne is attempting to clean theirs. But what's missing is the bridge between us, the bridge you spent 15 years building." She continued, "We are looking for a special consultant to oversee the restoration of the Aerodyne account, but from our side, someone to ensure transparency, to rebuild the logistical framework, and to guarantee that something like this can never happen again. The position would report directly to me. We are prepared to offer a compensation package that reflects the immense value we place on your unique expertise. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I had been made redundant by one company, only to be offered a senior, high-paying role by the very company that had been the instrument of my supposed downfall. I would be paid handsomely to fix the mess that Nolan had created by firing me. It was a perfect circular form of justice. I accepted. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a new office. It's on the 40th floor, with a panoramic view of the city. It's clean, modern, and quiet. My desk is clear, save for my laptop, and a single framed photo of my wife and daughter. The coffee mug they gave me is here too, a symbol of what's truly important. I'm on a conference call with the new executive team at Aerodyne. They are respectful, almost deferential. They listen when I speak. They ask for my opinion. We are rebuilding the supply chain the right way this time, on a foundation of transparency and mutual respect, the architecture of trust. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Dave. He accepted my offer last week to join my team at Axiom as my lead analyst. The text reads, "Just saw the latest quarterly report for Aerodyne. Stock is still in the toilet. Rumor is they're a prime target for a hostile takeover. Guess that's what happens when you gut the place." I smile. It's not a triumphant smile. It's a smile of quiet satisfaction. The kind of smile a craftsman has when a complex machine, once broken, is humming along perfectly again. The world is back in balance. Nolan tried to erase me, but in the end, he was the one who became redundant. So what's the moral of the story? What's the takeaway from all this corporate drama? It's simple, really. Your value is not determined by the person who signs your paycheck. It's not defined by your job title or the logo on your business card. Your true value lies in your competence, your integrity, and the relationships you build. It's in the work you do when no one is watching. An arrogant boss might be able to take your job, but they can never take your expertise. They can show you the door, but they can't erase the foundations you've built. In today's world, loyalty is often a one-way street. Companies demand it from you, but they rarely return it. So be loyal not to a company, but to your own standards. Be the architect of your own career. Document everything. Nurture your network. Understand your own worth, even when the people above you refuse to see it, because one day that quiet competence might be the most powerful weapon you have. The corporate world is full of Nolans, short-sighted, arrogant, and ultimately disposable, but it's the Sterlings, the quiet builders, the architects of a job well done, who have the last laugh. They always do. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased in your own career, let me know in the comments below. I read them all, and I want to hear your stories. This channel is for us, the people who know that in the long run, competence always wins. If you found this story satisfying, do me a solid and hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the story I have for you next week. It's a good one.